Hey, welcome back. Reading through the Bible in a year. Of course, we're right in the heart of Leviticus. Very exciting stuff. Today we are in chapters 14 through 16, although I'm going to, I think, spend most of the time on 16, the Day of Atonement. Today we're covering the Day of Atonement, and it's very, very important. Um, if you're confused by these things and a lot of these things, I want to recommend again this book. Fantastic book, highly recommended. Um, will help you understand some things that are going on throughout the Bible. But any case, today we're continuing forward. And where are you guys at with the dynamics of Leviticus? You starting to get your hands around some of it, or is it still just totally baffling? Again, I've been trying to suggest that the details are hard to get our minds all the way around, and there's different perspectives still amongst people that spend their lives studying these things about the why behind some of the things. But big picture, we should be able to start to understand again whether or not we grasp every detail or every why. These factors of the common versus the holy, and the clean versus the unclean. And I was reading, and I think that book today, that some of the words that are used in some translations have so much weight in the way that we understand them in the language, like profane is one. So profane is a word that we look at as like really, really bad, right? Like profanity kind of thing. And so that's not the best maybe word to use to understand the idea of something becoming unclean. Because it was something that would happen to everybody. Everybody amongst God's people in Leviticus would become unclean at one point or another, pretty much. And so, and it's not necessarily because they did anything wrong, as we've seen, and is covered in, we looked at last in yesterday's reading, that some things are due to like having a child. Some things are like if you deal with a dead body, which some people at least have to do to for that burial preparation process. They become unclean in that. Well, woman's monthly period, obviously well beyond her control, makes her unclean during that time. So it's not because the person necessarily did anything wrong. Although, when possible, they should avoid things like unnecessarily touching dead things and that sort of thing. And to kind of go even further into, so it could be defiling skin diseases. So, like if you have like some of us have had things in the past, like on your skin, like it's not necessarily your fault that you did anything particularly wrong for it to happen, but it happens. Um, and I think the idea here is that these things, something like a leprosy or a smaller skin disease that could become like the real full deal, like leprosy in the ancient world, that could end up being ultimately the cause of someone's death, needed to be discerned. That's what was going. I think some of what's going on in these things, so that these things that aren't how they're supposed to be. We're not supposed to have open wounds on our skin. And so they were sometimes healed and sometimes they got worse. And so they had to kind of process that, because the ultimate goal is life and wholeness, not kind of move away from that. So much of this is background, by the way, for Jesus's healings and encounters in the New Testament. That's one of the reasons why it's so important for us to understand these things. And we can think of examples of Jesus doing healing and then saying, "Hey, go present yourself to the priest." What's that about? It's about, you can read about it in Leviticus chapter 14. So all of this helps us understand the New Testament better. It's not just because of that. We want to understand it better just to understand Scripture better, but certainly that that piece of the situation there as well. So chapter 15 today is these discharges. I think the NIV translation has here. This is usually genital discharges. So for men's semen, for women period blood, would in both cases with different kind of periods of uncleanness around that, would make somebody unclean. And so this kind of covers that that situation. And then we also see in Genesis chapter 15 that unclean is contagious. So if you're for example, when a woman has discharge of blood during her monthly period, if you sleep in the same bed with her, you become unclean as well too. The whether or not things actually get physically dirty, the blankets in the bed and the clothes and everything becomes unclean. The same with a man. Verse 17 of chapter 15. Any clothing or leather that has semen on it must be washed, and it will be unclean until evening. When a man has sexual relations with a woman, both of them must bathe in water, for they will be unclean until evening. And so, this is something that they had to keep in mind. So unclean is contagious. Ultimately, holiness is also to be contagious, that God's holy people would become more holy, but common or the kind of regular, not holy, but clean was kind of the general status, is my understanding, right? So the nations around, those who weren't God's people, were continually unclean. God's people, the whole of them inside the camp, were by default clean, common and clean, but not unclean. And certain things in people were holy: the priests, the tabernacle, everything in the tabernacle, the offering sacrifices that were set aside. So start to kind of process that, think about it. Where are you at on that? Are you still like totally confused? Is it starting to click a little bit? Let me know in the comments kind of what you're thinking about that. Okay, chapter 16, the Day of Atonement. This is really going to be our kind of highlight feature for the reading today. This is a one-day event. As it's kind of remembered today, we know it as Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Yom means day. Kippur is this word that we would read in the Hebrew behind our translation for atonement. So Day of Atonement. So if you're familiar with that, it's a once a year thing given here. Still celebrated today in its own ways, and I'm not really up on kind of the practice today, given that the tabernacle temple is not there anymore for it to happen the way it's described here, but it's still remembered as being a very important day. There's several sacrifices, offerings that happen on that day, including some of the more regular ones. But one of the things that is, so let's think about the things that are unique about this, what happens on this day, the Day of Atonement, that doesn't happen on other days, because there's offerings, sacrifices every day, in one way or another. But today, some different things happen. So in verse 3 and 2, we see that Aaron, the high priest, is going to enter the most holy place. Now, what's the most holy place? Or what's another term that we refer to it as sometimes? The Holy of Holies, right? So remember, and you should be able to, if you can't, a really good exercise to do that's easy. I mean, it's easy enough to do. You have to know what you're doing. But so take a piece of paper or a napkin or something and draw out the basic tabernacle structure. You can find illustrations many different places, but it would be helpful if you could do that to kind of understand the kind of how things were arranged as we think about like the book of Leviticus. So of course there's the outer kind of courtyard. There's the altar of where the sacrifices are offered. There's the wash basin there, but then in the tent itself, the tabernacle will later be the temple, but it'd be the same basic design. There's the through that first curtain into the tent, there's the holy place. That's where the candelabra, the menorah is at, and the table. Remember what's on the table from Exodus and elsewhere? I'm going to give you guys some pop quizzes here. I'm trying to see, just self-check if you know what's going on. What's on the table? There's loaves, flat bread without yeast. How many? 12, because 12 tribes of Israel, right? The 12 sons of Jacob, Israel. That's now all the people. And remember, the light of the lampstand is shining on the 12 tribes. There's one more piece of furniture in that room, the holy place. What is it? It's the altar of incense. The altar of incense that's right in front of the curtain that goes into the most holy place. What's woven into that curtain? Do you remember? The cherubim. Where else have we seen the cherubim significantly in the biblical story? In Genesis 3, right? When Adam and Eve are kicked out of the garden, the flaming sword and the cherubim guard the way back into the fullness or intensity of God's presence. So the most holy place, or the Holy of Holies, is that inner part of the temple. And there's a piece of a significant thing in there. That's what the Ark of the Covenant. And inside the Ark of the Covenant are the tablets, right, of the covenant with the 10 commandments, the 10 words on them. So if you're not already familiar with that, just know that's going to really help you to understand what's going on written on the page without a diagram, to kind of see that and to be able to maybe explain it to others as well, as we kind of envision what's going on. So only once a year does the high priest get to enter the most holy place, the Holy of Holies. And the specific instructions on how it's done, right? So again, Leviticus 16, verse 2, tell your brother Aaron he is not to come whenever he chooses. Ooh, his sons did maybe something like that. Didn't go out with them. What happened to them? Or else he will die. They died, right? So he is not to come whenever he chooses into the most holy place behind the curtain in front of the atonement cover on the ark, or he will die. Okay? For I will appear in a cloud over the atonement cover. So this is a big deal this day. This is how, verse 3, Aaron is to enter the most holy place. And then the descriptions are given for the series of I think 5 different offerings that need to take place on that day. He needs to first, in verse 6, to have a sin offering to make atonement for himself and his household. Then he needs to take 2 goats. So this is again, so unique thing number 1. The high priest Aaron is going into the Holy of Holies, into the most holy place, and that's not something that happens all the time. It's something that's big, and it needs to be done right, or death, right? So big deal. It is a big deal. Okay, so 2 goats. Verse 8, he is to cast lots for the 2 goats, 1 lot for the Lord and the other for the scapegoat. So one of them is going to become an offering, a sacrifice. The other one is going to become the scapegoat. And again, this is different. This is not part of the regular daily things that happen here in the tabernacle. Aaron should bring the goat whose lot falls. So they're going to cast lots. Verse 8. Cast lots for the two goats, one lot for the Lord and the other for the scapegoat. Aaron shall bring the goat whose lot falls to the Lord and sacrifice it as a sin offering. Okay. But the goat chosen by Lot as the scapegoat, this is where we use the term scapegoat a lot kind of in the everyday language. This is kind of the idea here, right? But the goat chosen by Lot as a scapegoat shall be presented alive before the Lord to be used for making atonement by sending it into the wilderness as a scapegoat. This is very, very, very theologically important. So this goat, the scapegoat, is not going to be sacrificed on the altar. It's not going to be the way that all these other animals are. This is something different, and it's got different level of significance that we'll see here as we go on a bit in the story. He is to take a burning, verse 12, a burning censer full of burning coals from the altar before the Lord, and 2 handfuls of finely ground fragrant incense, and take them behind the curtain. Okay, behind the curtain again is to the holy place. So this is the process for how he is to do that. He is to put incense on the fire before the Lord, and the smoke of the incense will conceal the atonement cover above the tablets of the covenant law so that he will not die. Remember, we've seen so far already in the idea in Genesis, in Exodus, that to see the Lord, one can expect to be so consumed and overwhelmed by that as to die. Right? Remember when Moses asked God to see his glory, passes over him, but we already looked at that story. But in any case, so Aaron's going to enter this place where, again, and the idea of this, why is this? This is a room with a thing that they made in it, right? So what's the big deal? The big deal is that this is the place of the intensity of God's presence on earth. And so the smoke fills the room so that it gives Aaron that level of protection, right, from the consuming intensity of God's presence that consumed his 2 boys, right, when they did it inappropriately. Okay, verse 15, then he shall slaughter the goat for the sin offering of the people and take its blood behind the curtain to do with it as he did with the bull's blood. So this is different as well too. There's purification, if you will, that's being made for parts of the tabernacle that aren't normally. This year, it's been compared to like the once a year major cleaning. Like we go through and do a spring cleaning in our house, and we go, we normally pick up stuff and vacuum whatever, but sometimes on occasions we go through and do a thorough, a deep clean, we call it. This is a deep clean of the tabernacle, of the impurities that God's impure at times people bring into it, so that God can continue to live in their midst. So this is really important to the big picture of the story that we're learning about here, right? So he will sprinkle the blood of this offering on the atonement cover and in front of it. In this way, verse 16, he will make atonement for the most holy place because of the uncleanness and rebellion of the Israelites. This is interesting. Remember, the other the sin offerings that can be brought on a regular basis are for unintentional sin. You didn't realize, I broke God's law. I did something. I didn't realize I did that. I did it. So I'm responsible. and I have to bring a sin offering. And in the regular cycle, they had to, if they realized this, they brought the sin offering that would make atonement for that sin so that they could go about the regular burnt offering and fellowship offering that were a regular part of the course of the worship that would involve being able to have God's presence, approach God's presence, have God's presence in their midst. So this is more than that, because we start to hear about words like rebellion. So we've seen so far, we have the kind of this tension. Well, so what about if somebody sins intentionally? What about if they mean to? What about if they rebel? What's going on with that? Well, the daily cycle does not make provision for that. It kind of stands, I think the idea is, as a bit of a weight over the people until this day of atonement, is where that gets made right. And so, wow, what an important day for this in their cycle, right? Again, we see this language, verse 37. 17. Still in this is chapter 16, the last chapter we're going to be in. To make atonement for the most holy place until he comes out, having made atonement for himself, his household, and the whole community of Israel. So again, making for this place that enables them to be together then. So Mark, hey Mark, what you got? Oh, I can't show your comment on my screen for some reason. Talking about the blood. Yeah. Yes. I mean, the blood is always essential, but with the scapegoat, it's not about blood. So this is really interesting. So this, on this Day of Atonement, yes, like the sacrifice and bringing the blood in to cleanse the meeting place from the people's sins. Yes. And of course, the blood. I'm back. Can you guys see me? Wow, I don't know. I got kicked out somehow. Got kicked offline. So hopefully I'm back and I'm still here. So yeah. So this is good stuff. It's got so many New Testament connections. I mean, man, the book of Hebrews. This is like the foundation for understanding what's going on with Hebrews. And thanks, Mark. Glad you can see me again. And for Jesus bringing his blood I mean, we're going to wait on that until we get to Hebrews, because it's going to be a long time away. But this, when you understand this, that comes alive, right? When you understand what's happening in Leviticus, because we think about, the blood of Jesus, what does that really mean? Like, it's for us, if we're not in the biblical story, like Mark, you're talking about, it's not going to have the weight and the significance that it does when we move forward. So I'm going to be so excited in this read through the Bible when we get to the New Testament and we see all these various things that we're learning about really come to fulfillment there at that time. All right, but let's move on because this other goat is really, really important. Okay, verse 20, Leviticus 16. When Aaron has finished making atonement for the most holy place, right, with the blood of this offering, the tent of meeting and the altar, he shall bring forward the live goat. He is to lay both hands on the head of the live goat. Now, do you remember what happens normally early in Leviticus, the first 6 chapters we looked at? When somebody brought an offering, they not just laid but pressed one hand onto the animal to identify themselves with it. But with that single hand press, they were not, as some people have said, it can't be that they are transferring their sin to that animal, because that animal is going closer to the presence of God, and we can't bring sin closer to the presence of God. So we're identifying that animal. He's the actually blameless one that's taking our place, because we're not we're not that. But this double hand, this double press is different. Is a transference of the sin and the weight that the high priest as a mediator is carrying, but for the whole community, for the whole year. And again, this is the stuff for we'll see it. He is to lay both hands. So this is different. We're talking about things that are different. Enter in the Holy of Holies, different. Scapegoat, different than the regular cycle. Both hand press, different. On the head of the live goat, and confess over it all the wickedness and rebellion of the Israelites. Again, this is not part of the daily practice of offerings, of sacrifices. This is unique. This is the stuff that's really, really heavy. Like, it all matters, right? But this is the big stuff. All their sins. And put them on the goat's head. So this is the idea with this double press of the priest, the transference of all the sin, the rebellion, the wickedness gets put onto this goat, this scapegoat. And it will not be offered as a sacrifice. Remember, sin does not get closer to the intensity of God's presence. It's going to be sent the opposite way, as far as it can possibly go, away from God's presence. We think of the later prophetic word that we will read, right? As far, and we make it to song stuff, as far as the east is from the west, as far as He's taken our sin from us, right? God is getting rid of sin, and so this is really cool. So hopefully, if you've been whatever with Leviticus, today's the day you're like, this is awesome. This is good stuff, right? He shall send the goat away into the wilderness, into the care of someone appointed for the task. The goat will carry on itself all their sins to a remote place, and a man shall release it in the wilderness, right? It's out of the tabernacle. It's out of the camp. It's as far away as it can be. Our sins are gone. So this is beautiful, beautiful stuff in here. Okay. So what else do I want to say? At the end of this passage, then, verse 29 is the institution of this as a annual festival. This is one of the festival kind of big things of the calendar, if you will. All of the things, their daily offering cycle, their weekly day of rest, their annual things, the way that they what they eat and what they ate and didn't eat, and all these things are just supposed to be constant identity reminders of who they are as God's unique people. They didn't eat like everybody else. They didn't work all 7 days like everybody else. They didn't do things like everybody else around them. They were supposed to, the big idea throughout Leviticus, be holy as I am holy. God is shaping a people to be His very own, like His special possession. You will be for me a kingdom of priests. And ultimately, the goal will be to kind of mediate God's blood, like learn to live as His people, and then bring God's blessing to all the nations. Right? Hey, Great Commission, it's coming up, and everything in the New Testament means more when you understand the Old Testament. Okay, I hope you're seeing that and believing it. So, so they didn't work on that day. So, again, the regular cycles of offerings happened every day. But on this day, nobody works. This is a special day, a lasting observance. Verse 32, the priest who is anointed and ordained to succeed his father as high priest is to make atonement. He He will put on the sacred linen garments to make atonement for the most holy place, for the tent of meeting, and for the altar, and for all the priests, and for all the members of this community. This is a whole scale. Everything's getting dealt with, right? The whole tabernacle, all the way through into the most holy place, the altar, the priest, the whole community, all their sins. It's all being wiped clean. For that moment, it's done. But it's going to have to get done again, right? Still tomorrow, there'll be more regular offerings. And then next year and the year after and the year after that, there'll be other days of atonement until Jesus comes and things change. Last word, verse 34. This is to be a lasting ordinance for you. Atonement is to be made once a year for all the sins of the Israelites. All the sins. This is good news for them. Forgiveness. That's good stuff. And it was done, just as the Lord commanded Moses. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day.